Good morning. I'm going to share something I picked up from Max Lucado this morning. Picked it up from a devotional book that he put out, but it's got excerpts from other books. And I've read them all at some point, and this actually comes originally from the book called Glory Days. That's something my sister-in-law says to my brother and I when we start talking about sports stories from a long time ago. Yeah, Glory Days. Well, it was Glory Days for Joshua. He's going to lead the Israelites into the Promised Land. And you know, for a book about conquest, I mean, it's really a book about warfare. The book of Joshua really doesn't tell us much about military strategy. I mean, we know about Jericho. Well, go around it a few times and shout, and you know, it's like, well, that's not really a military strategy. What kind of weapons did Joshua's army use? We don't have too much information on that either. How many officers did the army have? Don't know really about that either. And the answer to all these questions is we just don't know because the Bible doesn't tell us. Why? Because that wasn't the emphasis. It wasn't a physical battle. Ultimately, it was a spiritual battle. This was turf that God wanted to give to His chosen people. And God can do whatever He wants to with His planet. So the conflict really wasn't against the Canaanites or the Amorites. The conflict was with the spiritual forces of darkness. Canaan was like a piece of the best property on planet Earth. I mean, you talk about real estate, you talk about location, location, location. You got fertile fields, valleys flowing with milk and honey. Milk and honey means you've got animal life and you've got plant life that's doing really well, in case you never put that together. But most important, this was God's gift to Israel. God set this property apart for His people because He wanted to bless the world through the nation of Israel. God promised Abraham, I will make you into a great nation. And He did. And the Hebrews were the couriers of the covenants of God's glory. And ultimately, the story of Jesus came through the promised land. Israel was the parchment. I like how Max says this. Was the parchment on which God's redemption story would be written. But the enemy had a counter strategy. Yeah, he didn't want the promised land ending up in the hands of God's chosen people. He didn't want the promised one to come. He didn't want Jesus to come to earth. He didn't understand when Jesus did come what the plan was. But He didn't want any of it to happen. He wanted to destroy God's people and destroy God's work. Joshua's battle then was a spiritual one. May I suggest to you, so is yours, and so is mine. The battle ultimately belongs to God, but it's not a physical battle, it's a spiritual battle. And there's all sorts of spiritual battles around us today. I like what the Apostle Paul writes to the church in Ephesus in chapter 6, verse 12. He says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places." The Bible refers to the age in which we live as this present darkness. That with all of the beauty, and I never tire of saying it, but that we live in a beautiful but a broken world. As beautiful as it is, there is darkness, and we see it. We feel it at times. But the battle that you're facing in your family, in so many different areas, it's a spiritual battle. Let God be your victor. Bring the battle to Him because we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. Trust God to bring the spiritual victory. God bless you. Have a great day.